All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. You see what happens when the gates are not kept, right? We're going to go to the clip and then we'll talk. By the way, I chopped the clip down to the portion that I want to talk about, so you'll see the still image and hear the audio. Let's go to the clip.
No, yeah, so basically I feel like the Mexican people were underrepresented there last night.
I feel it. I can see that.
I can see that too, man, but...
And a lot of people are telling me that I sound like bitter or something. Like, I'm not a rapper, fool. I'm not tripping about not being on stage. I'm saying, like, oh, Jeezy performed, I think, last night.
Yeah.
Did he?
That would have been nice if he would have been on stage.
If he would have.
Now, maybe the young legend had something to do, so he dipped.
Right, because all the artists that did perform were up there. Do you think it had something to do with it being Juneteenth?
I don't understand. I thought Juneteenth was like on the 16th or something like that. It's on June 19th.
It was Juneteenth yesterday.
Yeah, it was Juneteenth. Facts.
I respect it.
Do you think that had something to do with it?
Had something to do with what? The fact that they threw the show that day? Or that there were no Mexicans on stage?
There you go. Do you think it was supposed to be like...
First of all, let me start off by saying congratulations to Kendrick Lamar and all of the wonderful individuals that performed last night.
Yeah, shout them out.
So, I'm not trying to go racial with it, but I will say...
Oh, we're just picking each other brains apart.
Although it was Juneteenth, and I believe that's in remembrance of the massacre... I don't want to be wrong, but is it in Tulsa or in Selma?
I don't even know.
Or a place over there? I could be wrong, and I hate to be wrong, but I know it's in remembrance of a massacre that took place, right? I'd like to say that the Mexican people have been persecuted in this wonderful land for a long, long, long time.
Mm.
Somebody tell me they lying. Like, somebody tell me they were just playing. Like, somebody tell me that there was a second April Fool's that I don't know about that's in June and they were celebrating it and I'm just late to the party. Gotta be. Because there's no way they were fool enough to still upload this to the internet and think nothing was gonna happen. There's no way they were fool enough to at least not think, let's chop that segment off before we publish this. But no, I was like, you know what, I even gave it a few days. I said, let me just see how this unfolds. But no, they were serious. Wow. Folks make my job so easy. All right, so this is in response to the pop-up show that Kendrick Lamar did on Juneteenth at the LA Forum. And mind you, this was a show that could also be streamed online. You had people all over the world watching. This was something everybody was talking about on Twitter. It was even to the point where you had people in Sri Lanka talking about they not like us, right? And so the co-host, his biggest beef, and his name is LA Icon, his biggest beef is that he felt that Mexicans were underrepresented at this show because they weren't dancing on the stage at the end. And it's almost painted as if it's the responsibility of Kendrick Lamar to ensure that there were going to be Mexican people dancing on the stage at a show that indirectly commemorates Juneteenth. Y'all sure this wasn't like a second April Fool's joke? Somebody just let me know for real. If there's another one, please somebody tell me, because there's no way. All right, here's the beef that I have. So one, LA Icon clearly didn't do his research, right? He didn't even understand the origins of the show. And so yes, this is a show that was kind of celebrated in correlation with Juneteenth as like this big giant pop-up. And so the fact that he had the wrong perception of what the show was because he thought it was about LA culture, and then gets mad because the show doesn't meet the expectations of what he created in his head because he didn't pay attention to the details of the show. And then was still fool enough to upload it. And fool enough to stand 10 toes down with the foolery, because we'll get to some other things he said later down the line. That's crazy to me. But here are the two bigger issues that I have. If you listen to the clip, you hear the co-host try to correct him and say, well, actually, you realize this was kind of in relation to Juneteenth, right? And they start having this conversation about, oh, Juneteenth was, I thought that was on the 16th. Oh, wait, that was the 19th. Yeah, that was the day of the show. Oh, well, you know, I don't want to be wrong. I thought Juneteenth, you know, I think it's about the massacre in Tulsa or Selma or over there somewhere. Because, you know, when it comes to black issues, they just put all of our stuff in one big bucket and just throw it across the field. Just put it in a black box, say something black. It's got something to do with them over there. And so, you know, dismisses all of that because, again, the bigger issue was there wasn't enough Mexicans dancing on the stage. The hell with Juneteenth and Tulsa and Selma and all that other stuff over there. But there weren't enough folks dancing on the stage to represent me and mine. It's like, that's the crazy part to me. And so the idea of being so disrespectful and dismissive to the plight of black Americans, all because, again, you're pissed because your folks weren't dancing on the stage at a show that you didn't create. Imagine that. But then it gets deeper, because then after being corrected, after it's acknowledged that this is an event in correlation with Juneteenth, it's a LA pop-up just celebrating black culture, this, that, and third, right? And again, when we talk about just, again, the origins of Juneteenth, something specific to black Americans, who again were the descendants of slaves, right? Where finally the last segment of people who were enslaved in Galveston, Texas are finally being told, hey, slavery ended a while ago, so y'all can stop working right now if y'all want to, right? That's the origins. But never mind all that, because me and my boys weren't dancing on the stage. So the idea of, after being corrected, instead of just saying, you know what, yeah, I effed up, my bad, y'all, okay, woo, glad y'all cleared it up, my bad, and then thinking like, yeah, let's just scrap that segment. No, he wants to double down. So then what does he start saying? You know, well, shout out to Kendrick, but I do have to say that, you know, Mexicans too have dealt with lots of torment. And my thing is like, you know what? This is what folks love to do all the time. Folks never bring up an issue they're passionate about until they see black people getting something, or until they see black people have something. And mind you, this is just a concert, right? You know, I love entertainment, but at the end of the day, this show was nothing tangible. It's a great night for culture. It's a great night that people can look back on and say, I was in the crowd that night. That's a dope moment for the era and time. But it's not like the concert ended and all of a sudden there was going to be all this policy that helped black people and it pulled folks out of poverty and closed the world. It wasn't going to be none of that. A symbolic show. That's what it was. But even in that moment, you know, you get that. Now all of a sudden, well, you know, Mexicans, they have dealt with lots of torment. And I'm like, and that is true. But the thing is, you weren't thinking about that until you saw that black people had a piece of something. And then because you had gotten proven wrong, you said, I'm going to double down. I still got to get the one up. So I'm going to dismiss the entire plight of black people, whether it be the conversation of slavery, which would again tie to the conversation of Juneteenth, whether it be anti-black violence at the hands of white mobs, if that's Tulsa, whether that again be anti-black violence at the hands of white mobs, again, when we're talking about Selma and everything else like that, and all the people getting stumped out and sprayed at the bridges, you know, whatever else he was talking about, all of that is dismissed because now all of a sudden it's about, well, Mexicans had this too. And my thing is, you have a platform. If you're so passionate about what has happened to your collective, which you have a right to be passionate about, then bring it up on your platform. You weren't talking about it 5 minutes before. You're only bringing it up now because somebody brought up a black issue. And that's the thing. When it comes to black issues, y'all only want to show up for the good time. Y'all only want to be there for the party, right? So to hell with everything else. Y'all not about to sit here and go 10 toes down to fight and combat anything else that affects black people in a negative space. But when it comes to something cool that we've done, when it comes to something that's celebrated, when it comes to something that hits the world stage, now y'all want to be a part of it. And then if we're not all of a sudden super inclusive, now you want to pull the, well, we were tormented too card. Really, I could stand behind you with that, but even if you wanted us to rally behind you for the things that y'all are fighting for, collectively, y'all are not on the same page because 2/3 of y'all are going this way and 1/3 of y'all still get behind policy that actually disenfranchises your own collective. So where do you want us to go with this? Right? And then on top of that, a lot of y'all get behind policy that disenfranchises black folks, right? Because a lot of y'all come here and a lot of y'all unfortunately still align behind the ideas of anti-blackness, right? So where do you want us to be in this? Like, that's kind of the nonsense that I have. And the bigger lesson to be understood here is that every space is not going to be for you, right? And it's even crazier because then after this dude gets all the smoke, he comes up with this really, like, it wasn't even an apology. It was a follow-up video, and he starts still kind of doubling down. And at the end, well, and again, like, shout out to Kendrick, shout out to Juneteenth. Like, all of a sudden, this is the end of Showtime at the Apollo during amateur night after they done won, and they shouting out all the family members. I like to thank my cousin Teresa, my cousin Brandon. I want to thank my cousin Mark. What's up, y'all? I see. Like, no. You just can't all of a sudden shout out to Juneteenth like all of a sudden it's one of your boys on the corner. That's not how this works. You didn't even apologize. That's the part that gets me. But going back to what I said, every space is not always going to be for you. Right? And unfortunately, there's too many people who think they are entitled to real estate in black spaces and black culture and black everything, because anytime folks see black folks having any element of prosperity, which on a collective standpoint a lot of times is limited due to structural policy, when they see black folks get a little piece of something, a lot of times it's something symbolic like a concert or a random Black Lives Matter sprayed in the street, or our politicians taking a knee for 8 minutes rather than going and actually fighting to fix the policy. Folks feel like they gotta get a piece of that too. That's theirs too, because everybody thinks they own real estate in blackness, right? But they only want to show up for the good times, right? Dead silent when we actually need you. And so that's the issue that I have, right? Folks want to be the face of something without the work. And what I mean by that is this. If we're talking hip-hop in 2022 and 2023, very bad years for hip-hop in the music industry. Not as big, not as eventful. A lot of songs were not charting in the same realms that they were a few years earlier. A lot of arena tours weren't doing as well. Hip-hop has kind of been on a slow decline commercially. In addition to that, record labels are now in a space where they're shifting their focus to Latin music, right? Because they say it has a more world and global appeal. And I really think that's in response to the expansion and the explosion of Afrobeat. And so that's kind of where the focus is going now. Let's focus on Latin music. So labels are pulling back from what they put into hip hop. But here out of the blue, you have Kendrick Lamar, who's in this beef with Drake, and they're just tossing records back and forth. Nobody thought that Kendrick was going to have 2 or 3 more songs in the clip that he was going to unload, and one of them would blow up and become one of the biggest songs of the year. So Kendrick literally revives what's been happening to hip-hop commercially. Now, I will say I think the women in hip-hop have been doing their parts to kind of keep things up there, but for the men, a lot of them have been struggling. Like, the women have been having a great time. They're selling out arenas. They're racking up all these hits. The men have been having a rough time, right? Kendrick kind of reignites the fire. Boom, there's this massive hit. That's still a hit right now in this era where a lot of times songs will peak on the charts and fall the next week. It has some sustainability. So riding the momentum of this massive hit, he throws this massive concert. It's one of the biggest nights in LA, at least this year so far. And so he's done the work. And then what happens? Here you go talking about, well, we were underrepresented. You're underrepresented because you weren't a part of that. That wasn't yours. But again, folks love to ride the coattails of other people's work. And then again, wanting to be the face of something that they didn't create. At the end of the day, if you really are that adamant about making sure that there's representation, then build your own show. And I mean that from a place of love. Build your own show. Because again, people again think that they are entitled to black spaces. Because can't we be for real? If there was a Mexican heritage concert at SoFi Stadium or Crypto Arena or the Forum and you could stream it online, I'm not going to watch it and get mad because me and my folks couldn't monopolize the show, and I think there needs to be more black folks in this show, because I recognize and understand that that's pertinent to your culture. That's what you all are celebrating. I can celebrate it with you, but it's not my show. I'm not a part of your experience because you have your own in the same way that I have mine. There are some things that we collectively share on a more universal scale, but at the end of the day, I have a respect for your plight in the same way that you should for mine, right? But of course, again, it never works that way. And then the part that gets me is the Kendrick pop-up was open to anybody. Anybody who wanted to go could go. If you could afford the tickets, go for it. And so when you look at the show, there's this massive melting pot of people in the audience, right? Because that audience was mixed with so many groups represented. But again, your beef is that you didn't see enough folks on the stage dancing. And it goes back to what I said earlier. It was so easy to dismiss Juneteenth and Tulsa and Selma. You didn't even know what the stuff was. Didn't even know if it was the 16th or the 19th. You know, again, put it in that black box and throw it across the field. But the bigger beef that you want to have, that you really got to fight about, is the fact that y'all weren't on the stage dancing, right? And just to really remind y'all that, you know, Mexicans, we were dealing with our stuff too. Yes, you can deal with what you're dealing with, but you don't get to go and try to monopolize somebody else's experience and center your lens to it because it doesn't benefit you. Because again, the idea of too many folks riding the coattails but then want to dictate how the jacket is made, right? That's the beef that I really, really have. Too many folks riding coattails but want to dictate how the jacket is supposed to be made. And I'm just seeing too much of it. Again, folks only there for the good time. And so that's like the bigger beef that I have. And again, it goes back to the idea of folks thinking they're entitled to be in these spaces. And the reason I'm harping so much on the elements of blackness is because Juneteenth was brought into the conversation. Juneteenth is specific. It's not inclusive to everybody, right? So that's where that conversation of blackness comes from. And the idea of still dismissing all that because your folks weren't dancing on the stage. Can you be for real? It makes me think back to Gina Rodriguez as well. Like, I remember when Black Panther came out, and you know, it's this big moment because there's always been kind of an underrepresentation of black superheroes, so finally there's one. And then what did she come out and say? I mean, it would be nice if the Latino community had one. And I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. And this is not to take away from what you all want for your collective. Beautiful, fight for it. But it's just very interesting that a lot of times these issues don't come up until blackness comes into the conversation. And a lot of times these issues are reactionary to black people having some kind of element where they get to thrive for a few minutes, right? Because even when it's all said and done, our hero unfortunately died. Right? And so the idea of, well, you know, I wish we had one. And then they paint it in the realm of, well, black people need to actually fight for us to have ours. That's the other beef. Everybody pulls us into their stuff. But I don't see the same element of avocation when it comes to black issues, right? And so it's either one, you want black people to be the mule for whatever it is that you have, right? Or they will use the black experience as the threshold of measurement to whatever it is that they're fighting for while still being anti-black all the time. While still standing in the way of things, while still being in a space where there's no respect for the black plight, right? They take the bits and pieces that they want out of blackness and dismiss everything else. Good luck, folks. Good luck. Like, that's how they move with us, right? Or folks want to be included in everything that we have. And oddly enough, black people are a very welcoming collective, and we tend to welcome everybody and everything anyway. So then, even when folks get included, not only are they a guest, they want to be in charge, right? It's like they're a guest in the house, but they want to dictate when everybody has to go to bed. Right? That's the piece that I get, right? And so that's the piece that gets me, because I'm like, y'all always want to be in charge of stuff, but then again, when your presence is actually needed for the bigger issues that again could benefit everybody, folks are silent. I'm not trying to be that person, but if we talk about the civil rights era, collectively, many of you stayed home. Because you were told that if you associate too much with black folks or get too far in that civil rights stuff, white Americans are going to treat y'all just like they treat black folks. And so many people said, well, we'll sit out, we'll be quiet. Now, this is not to take away from the people who actually did go and fight and march and advocate. But there were many more who stayed home and said, we're not a part of this. And that's how folks have been moving for decades, right? Folks sit on the sidelines and wait till the good stuff comes out, and then they come to collect, right? And if they don't get enough, they get mad. And then they get behind policy that strips away from that very group that fought for what it was they fought for, right? I know folks are saying I'm making this too deep, but literally, this is so symbolic of everything that we're talking about, right? And then the crazier part for me, y'all are talking about all this representation, but can we talk about the anti-blackness, right? Like, half of y'all can't even stop saying the N-word. Some of y'all say that more than I do. Y'all use the N-word like the period at the end of a sentence, right? But then you want representation in a black space on Juneteenth. Can we be for real? Like, my goodness. Whew. This is why we need gatekeeping is a thing. And I get it. I understand that music is a cultural experience that is shared by everybody. But again, people have gotten so comfortable with this shared experience that they forget the origins. And they forget that sometimes you're a guest in the house. And on top of that, going back to the main emphasis of all of this, Juneteenth. Boom. And before anybody tries to be a smart aleck and starts trying to bring up a Nacimiento, listen, if we want to go there and bring up that story, you can, but I can guarantee you that LA Icon knows nothing about Nacimiento, and that was not going to be something he brought up, so y'all can try to save that argument as well. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up, right? That's your homework. We'll talk about it on my next live. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.